I ended the best relationship of my life on a Thursday evening. He did not see it coming. He sat across from me with confusion in his eyes and asked me what he had done wrong. He went through everything. Had he been distant? Had he said something? Had he not been enough? I told him it was not him. I told him I just did not feel the same way anymore. Both of those things were lies. He had done nothing wrong. He had been everything right. And I felt more for him in that moment than I had ever felt for anyone in my entire life. But I ended it anyway, because the truth, the real reason, was something I could not say out loud. Not to him, not to anyone. A secret I had been carrying for 3 years that I was not ready to let go of. A secret that I believed would destroy everything the moment it came into the light. So I protected it, and I broke the heart of the kindest man I had ever known to do it. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old. I am a primary school teacher from Edinburgh. And I am going to tell you the story of the biggest mistake I ever made, and what it cost me before I finally found the courage to tell the truth. I met Daniel at a mutual friend's dinner party 2.5 years before I ended things with him. He was quiet in a room full of loud people. Not shy, just calm. The kind of calm that comes from someone who is completely comfortable with themselves. I noticed him immediately. We talked for most of that evening. About small things at first. The food, the other guests, a book we had both read. And then somehow, without either of us planning it, we were talking about real things. About our families. About the choices we had made. And the ones we wished we had made differently. I drove home that night thinking about him. He called 3 days later. We had our first date the following weekend. And from the very first evening I knew this was different. This was the kind of person you do not find very often. Daniel was patient and honest and completely without pretense. He said what he meant. He did what he said he would do. He remembered things I mentioned in passing and brought them back weeks later in ways that made me feel genuinely seen. After years of relationships where I always felt slightly invisible, Daniel made me feel like the most important person in the room. By the end of the first year, I was completely in love with him, and I was terrified, because underneath everything, underneath the happiness and the ease and the feeling of finally having found something real, there was the secret. I need to explain what the secret was, because this story does not make sense without it. 3 years before I met Daniel, I had been in a serious relationship with someone else. His name was James. We were together for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, when our relationship was already falling apart, I found out I was pregnant. James and I did not make it. The relationship ended badly. And I made a decision, alone, frightened, 26 years old, that I have had to live with every day since. I placed my daughter for adoption. Her name is Ella. She was born in April. She is 3 years old now, and she is being raised by a wonderful family in a city 2 hours away from Edinburgh. I know this because the adoption was open, meaning I receive updates and photographs twice a year. I chose that because I could not bear to not know she was safe and loved. But I have never told anyone outside of my immediate family. Not a single friend, not a colleague, nobody. The shame of it, and I know that word is complicated and I have spent years in therapy unpacking it. The shame was something I carried completely alone. I was not ashamed of Ella. I have never been ashamed of her. She is the most perfect thing I have ever been part of. I was ashamed of my own pain, of not being able to explain myself in a way I thought people would understand. When Daniel and I started getting serious, I knew the secret was going to become a problem. Not because Daniel was the kind of person who would judge me. He was not. But because telling him meant saying out loud something I had never said to anyone outside my family. It meant watching his face change. It meant risking the one relationship that had ever made me feel truly safe. So I did not tell him. I kept finding reasons to wait. We were too new. The moment was not right. I needed more time. I told myself I would tell him when I was ready. I was never ready. By the time we had been together 18 months, the secret had become a wall between us. Not visible, not something he could point to, but I felt it every single day. Every time he talked about wanting children someday. Every time he asked me why I seemed distant sometimes. Every time he looked at me with that complete openness he had. And I looked back knowing I was not giving him the same. I started pulling away. Not because I wanted to, but because staying close meant the secret getting closer to the surface. And I was not ready for that. Daniel noticed. Of course he noticed. He asked me several times if everything was okay. I told him I was just stressed with work. I told him I was going through something personal I was not ready to talk about. He accepted that. He gave me space. He was patient in the way he always was. He did not deserve what I did next. On a Thursday evening, I sat across from him in a restaurant we had been to on our first date, and I told him I did not think we should be together anymore. He went very still. He asked me what had changed. He asked me if he had done something. He went through everything. His work schedule, a trip he had taken, a conversation we had that had not gone well, trying to find the thing he had done wrong so he could fix it. I told him it was not him. I told him I just did not feel the same way anymore. I watched his face absorb that, and I watched something in him close off, quietly and completely, in a way I had never seen before. He paid the bill. He walked me to my car. He hugged me, and he said, "I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for." I drove home and I was sick. The months that followed were the loneliest of my life. Not because I had lost Daniel, though that loss was real and constant and heavier than I had expected, but because I was alone with the secret again. And this time there was no relationship to distract me from it, just me and the truth I had been carrying, and the growing certainty that I could not keep carrying it forever. I went back to therapy. I started being honest, really honest, for the first time about what the secret had cost me. Not just with Daniel, with myself, with every relationship I had kept at arm's length because of it. 6 months after I ended things with Daniel, I told my best friend everything. I sat in her kitchen and I told her about Ella and about James and about the adoption and about all of it. She cried. Then she held my hands across the table and said, "Why did you carry this alone for so long?" I did not have an answer, but something shifted that day. Something that had been locked for 3 years started to open. I reached out to Daniel 8 months after our breakup. I asked if he would meet me for coffee. He said yes. I do not know why he said yes. Maybe he still had questions. Maybe he just needed to hear something that made sense of what had happened. I told him everything. I told him about Ella, about James, about the adoption, about why I had ended things the way I did. I told him I was sorry, not just for ending it, but for not trusting him enough to tell him the truth when we were together. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "I wish you had told me." I said, "I know." He said, "I would not have left." Those 4 words broke me open in the middle of a coffee shop in Edinburgh on a Tuesday afternoon. We are not back together. I do not know if we ever will be. Some things that break cannot be put back together exactly as they were. But we have been talking. Slowly and carefully and honestly, in a way we never quite managed when we were together. What I know now, what therapy and time and the courage to finally tell the truth have taught me, is this. The secret was never the problem. The shame was. And shame only survives in silence. The moment I stopped protecting it, the moment I let it exist in the open air where other people could see it and respond to it, it lost most of its power over me. Ella is 3 years old. She is healthy and happy and loved. I received photographs last month. She has the most extraordinary smile. I am her mother, I always will be, and I am finally learning to say that without flinching. I broke Daniel's heart to protect a secret that did not need protecting as much as I needed protecting from my own fear. That is the most honest thing I have ever said, and it only took me 3 years to say it out loud.